So as Anne said, DHPSNY is a program of the New York State Library and the New York State Archives with services provided by the Conservation Center for Art and Historic Artifacts. Our team is kind of divided across the state. We have some folks up, I'm in Rochester, we have some folks in Rochester, and some part of our team is based out of Philly. But our goal in all of our work is to meet organizations where they're at. So we are usually traveling to you in a number of different ways. Our services include not only the planning and assessment services that we'll go more in depth about today, but also educational programs of all sorts. We do in-person workshops, webinars, online courses, and a series of what we call the DHPSNY dialogues. And those are all virtual programming that you can access more information about on our website, DHPSNY.org. And we do have some more workshops coming up this fall, and we'll have a new series of those happening in the spring and summer of next year. So that's an ever-changing list of things coming up. So those are all made freely available, and all of our webinars are recorded and available online. So you can go back to our long list and covers many, many topics in archives and preservation. So anything you might want to learn about, please check those out. And we also do a lot of communications and outreach. So you may have met us at out at a conference or seen our social media. We also have a lot of different blog series that we try to share information and resources out through. And if you're not already, please do sign up for our email newsletter. We share not only the services that DHPSNY provides in different deadlines and upcoming programming, but we also share about grant opportunities across the state and other programs that are happening, things that might be of interest to collecting organizations. So I kind of already jumped into this. The one that I didn't touch on is mentorship. So we do have, we have had mentorship circles. Our mentorship circles already taken off for this year, but you'll hear more about what's coming up for mentorship in 2025 as that comes out. But again, check out our website, sign up for our email newsletter, and you'll see all of our upcoming programming and can register for those. Again, provided free of charge to anyone who participates with collecting organizations across the state. So please do feel free and join us for all of those. And again, mentioned our website and our blog. We have a recent blog series that I think is really helpful that we're calling DHPS Tips, which is about just like tips and tricks in preservation, which has some really interesting topics that you can find on our website. And we also put out an annual newsletter, so that'll be coming out towards the end of the year, kind of as a new year announcement will come out through for that newsletter, talking about what we've been up to this year and what organizations across the state have been doing. So keep an eye out for that as well. As I mentioned, this is our website, DHPSNY.org. We have all the information about all of our services here, as well as our resources page where we hope you will find helpful resources from other organizations and different things that can help in preservation, archival training or topics, or connecting you to emergency resources, things like that. And that is all available on our website. So for our planning and assessment services, that's really what I'm going to dive into today. I'll kind of present on each of the services and talk a little bit about eligibility, and then we'll kind of open the floor for questions that you all might have about any of those things. So at the end, feel free to put questions in the chat as they come up, and we'll read them out at the end. So in terms of our planning and assessment services, as Anne mentioned, we have archival needs assessments, preservation surveys, condition surveys, and those are all assessments that bring someone on site to look at a particular topic within your collections and provide a report that hopefully provides some good resources and recommendations and helps to just set priorities for the organization moving forward in terms of either archives or preservation. And then we also have foundational planning and strategic planning, and those two programs are meant to really provide an actionable plan for your organization. Foundational planning really looks at the core of your collecting activities and your policies and procedures, and hopes to build a plan for the next 2 years for your organization to really build capacity. Strategic planning is really setting that strategic plan for over the course of the next few years. So as DHPSNY, we do require a goal of that to be about your collections, but that also is an overarching strategic plan for the organization. I'll talk a little bit more about that and how we partner with the New York Council on Nonprofits for that work in a minute. So our archival needs assessments, I often chat with folks about which one of these services feels like the right fit, because there are a lot of options. And so our archival needs assessments really look at the core of collections management. So how are collections arranged, described? Have you done an inventory? What is the administrative infrastructure that oversees that work? What policies and procedures do you have in place? What kind of staffing are you dedicating to the archives? And then it dives a little bit into more of a top level look at collections care and storage. So some just, basic things about your storage spaces and some top level things that you might tackle in terms of collections care, housing, or, setting that list of preservation priorities. So archival needs really diving into more of that intellectual control of the collections and thinking about arrangement and description and making those collections really accessible. A preservation survey will look at, again, the administrative infrastructure that supports preservation, so staffing and policies and procedures. And then it'll do a much deeper dive into the building conditions, the environmental conditions, what you have in place in terms of security. Do you have an emergency plan, or are you needing to write one? And then it does a much deeper dive into collections care and storage, thinking about, storage furniture and different housings, and really prioritizing items for future preservation updates or conservation treatment, and also diving into talking about handling of your collections materials. So this survey really does a much deeper dive into the this physicality of the collections, thinking about the physical infrastructure and doing that deep dive into collections care. So this is a really great one to think about if you are really looking at your environment. We do send out a little kit at the beginning of the preservation survey of data loggers and a light meter, so that you can start to spend at least a couple of weeks before we come on site monitoring for those things. And we have a little bit of data to just show you how to look at those things if you aren't already doing that. And I think that's a really great tool to kind of jumpstart some things for folks. Again, the outcome of both the archival needs assessment and the preservation survey are both a report that give you hopefully a lot of recommendations that you can move forward with and help to set priorities, because we know that this work is not, there's always a lot to be done, right? And so helping to set achievable goals based on your organization's specific capacity, your staff, your funding, the time that you have to commit to this work, and as well as helping to give you language. So sometimes, we're often working with folks who know exactly what they want or need to do in their collections, but you need that added voice to help advocate for your collections. And these reports can be a really useful tool for that as well, to take to board, who will make decisions, directors, or even to use in your grant writing, will help provide some language that could be used for that as well. So they're a really great tool to just have in your back pocket. So we also do condition surveys. We recommend doing a preservation survey first before a condition survey. A condition survey allows us, approved organizations will send a conservator on site for 2 days to look at a discrete part of your collection or a small collection within your archives, really looking at that sampling of materials to do an item level survey of those materials and to provide recommendations, everything from this set of materials could probably use conservation treatment so that you can plan for that in the future. Or here are some housing recommendations that would really just support these other materials in your collections without needing to take them for conservation work. And so it really helps you to develop that action plan for things that you can do in-house and things that you might need to find other funding for, or plan other funding for further conservation work. And again, this is good for organizations who have already completed a preservation plan, because we can go much more in depth into the needs of a particular collection once we've already looked at the overarching preservation for the entire collection. Again, the outcome of this is a report, but also that item level list of detailed information that you'll get from a conservator to look at specific set of collection materials. And so that can be really useful, not only to have that internally for that information and building out a plan for those things, but also to take for grant funding if you wanted to apply for different grants across the state that provide conservation treatment as an option. You'd have that information to get a more detailed quote and go into that work of applying. So those are kind of the survey and assessment part of our planning and assessment. The other two services are our planning assistance services. So a strategic plan, the outcome of the process is really a 3-year plan that aims to set timelines and accountability, responsibility for different items in your strategic plan. And we do this in collaboration with the New York Council on Nonprofits, or NYCON, as you'll see here on the slide. So DHPSNY and NYCON staff collaborate to facilitate a retreat. So usually what we do is send a webinar that really introduces the process and hopefully sets anyone who will be involved up for knowing where we're headed with that. We do a survey of board members and folks who are really involved in the collections, including any staff or really active volunteers. And those really look at a SWOT analysis for the organization and developing out those 3-year goals, what everyone would like to see happen for the organization. And then we do a retreat where we just kind of talk all of that through and start to set those priority, big overarching goals for your organization. And the outcome of that is a drafted strategic plan that whoever is on your strategic planning committee can then take and develop out further and finalize and get approved. So you have a 3-year strategic plan to help you track and move forward. And again, just as a requirement of doing that through the DHPSNY program, we just do ask folks to ensure that one of the goals of those, at least one of the goals of those plans really involves the collections care. And then our other, this is our newest service, but it's been around for several years now, and that is our foundational planning assistance. So this is a much, kind of smaller program. We do this virtually. And so the first session we spend doing kind of, whatever team you've come up with to work through this process with, we do a SWOT analysis just in live time. We do like a brainstorming session about vision for the collections moving forward and any of those, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, as well as starting to think about your goals for the collections and where you really want to head. And again, setting goals within the next 1 to 2 years. So something that would be really achievable. Often that includes writing policies and procedures if you don't already have them, or really like thinking about developing out plans for future growth of the collections and collections care and preservation. So this is a fully virtual process. We spend the second section looking at a specified set of goals then and kind of responding to that and thinking about timelines and priorities within those, so that I can then develop a plan at the end, a report that really gives you some key resources to start diving into those goals over the next 2 years. So in terms of eligibility, there are some pretty general guidelines, but also I'm always available to talk with you specifically about your organization. Overall, for all of our services, nonprofit cultural institutions that hold historical records or library research materials are eligible for all of our services. Local government organizations are eligible for preservation surveys and condition surveys. The difference here is the other three are not open to local government organizations. So the general guidelines remain the same, except that local government organizations, we can only do preservation or condition surveys with you. So yes, the key things to be thinking about: are you nonprofit? Do you hold historical research materials? And are you actively either making those materials public or working towards making them public? Sometimes we're working with folks who aren't quite providing that regular public access, but they're working towards that as a goal. And so we can also find some programs to fit that kind of stage of operation. So on our website, again, DHPSNY.org, we have a page for each of these different types of services. And within that, we provide an FAQ for common questions about the process itself. You can look at sample applications to see kind of what the questions will be and what we'll ask of you. We do try to keep those really accessible and as brief as possible. So hopefully it doesn't feel like too onerous of a task. We also provide a sample table of contents for the different reports that we will write as an outcome of these services. And we try to give you a timeline so you generally understand how long this process will take and what that will kind of look like. Again, we list out the criteria for participation, and there's a button to apply. So our next deadline is November 22nd. And those applications, our applications are open year round. You can apply at any time, but those deadlines are really when we will pull any applications that have been submitted and review them. So in that application, you do have to fill out an application to apply and to be accepted into any of those service tracks. However, again, those services are provided free of charge once you're accepted. So we really just are going to be asking basic organization and contact information. We ask you to tell us a little bit about the collections. What does your collection include? You know, what years does it cover? Why you think the service that you have applied for is appropriate at this time. You can certainly apply for more than one service in any round, but you will only be approved for one. And I'll talk a little bit about in a minute how that might change for you all. We also ask some questions about fiscal responsibility and current policies and procedures. If you don't have them, that's fine. We're just asking what you currently have in place. So there's no concern to like create policies and procedures to apply for anything. If you don't have them, we're really looking to approach these services from wherever you are at currently. And then we really want to know what your areas of concern are, along with why you think the service is appropriate at the time. What are you really like most, what are your priority areas to cover? And then thinking about staffing and visitation, just understanding what that looks like for your organization. And each service application, whether it's an archival needs assessment or a preservation survey, will have a few more specific questions that relate more to the topics covered in those services. We do ask for a series of additional documents. A commitment letter from the director or the board chair, kind of your highest ranking officer. We do currently ask for most recent annual financial statements, but I will say that kind of requirement will be going away in 2025. We do need proof of tax exempt status, as that is one of our eligibility requirements. And then we just really want to understand board structure and staff member and volunteers, how many you have and who's kind of involved in that process. We'll ask for any of your written policies or procedures that you already have. And then if there's any other, kind of background print collateral that you have about your organization that you'd like to share with us, you can include that as well. So once you've applied, again, rolling applications, you can apply all year round. The applications, once we pull those on those deadlines, go through a series of field reviewer evaluations. So folks working in collections across the state, ranking each application based on fiscal responsibility, the commitment to the service, and the needs of that service. And then those reviews and compiled applications all go to an advisory committee of 7 folks from across the state working in collections who vote on whether to approve those applications to each service Or sometimes if they feel the organization is not ready, they'll give recommendations on how I can work with you to better improve your application and ask you to apply again. So we always say a no at a first application is never a definitive no. We want to work with you and get you into the right service. The other thing that can happen in this process is if the advisory committee feels that maybe you applied for an archival needs assessment, but what you really should start with based on your goals and needs that you've demonstrated in your application is a preservation survey, they might offer to shift you to a different service and approve that. So all of those things I can work with you through after we get those results. And really our goal is to get everyone to a yes in some way, shape, or form. So again, the review timeline. Applications are open year-round. We review them in March, July, and November. So while our next deadline will be November 22nd, those applications will be reviewed in December and announcements probably out by early January, meaning you'll have a spring assessment timeframe. We'll also have a deadline in March, which will mean a summer assessment, and in July, which will mean a fall of next year assessment. So we have those 3 times a year on this cycle so that you can expect if you've applied in a previous season, your assessment process will kick off the following season. So you can kind of start to think about when it might be most appropriate for your organization to start to tackle this work. The only one that falls outside of that category is our foundational planning assistance, because that is that virtual series of meetings. Those are accepted year round. We try to review those. It's an internal committee who reviews those. And we try to review those within the month received or within 30 days of them being received, and send you a notification within a few weeks so that you know the status of that. And those can kick off on a much different timeline. Those kick off much sooner, closer to the application round. So if you're interested in foundational planning, you're not looking at the same deadlines as everyone else. You will try to keep that as tight a timeline around when we receive them as possible. So I have a sign up link here for our e-news. If you're not already signed up, I will make sure that link gets shared, and you can register. You can also just go to DHPSNY.org and use the link there at the top of our website to register for our e-news. That's where you will see all of our updates and reminders about upcoming application deadlines and more information about all of our services. We also have a blog series that kind of looks more closely at each of the services and what that process looks like if you're interested, and that's all navigable from our website as well, and we'll share those out in our e-news. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And Chris, maybe we can stop recording at this point. So